Greetings, Dan Sabo here. It is December 21st, 2017, and it is the morning after the big meeting at the Historic District Commission last night at Northville City Hall, and that was to be a public hearing about the impending or possible demolition of a historic structure on Main Street, actually at 341 East Main Street. It was a home that was built just at the end of the Civil War. And I just wanted to make a record of what happened last night. It was actually quite incredible what happened. First of all, it was I got there at about 10 minutes to 7, just 10 minutes before the meeting started, and there were maybe 4 or 5 people in the room, and I thought, oh gee, it's not going to be a good meeting, because usually when not many people show up, the odds are against the preservationists. But by the time it hit 7 o'clock, it was almost a standing room only crowd. I mean, not every seat was taken, but it was a pretty full house. I would say there were at least somewhere between maybe 25 to 35 people, if not more, as the meeting went on. It was a pretty big sized crowd. But anyway, I think there were a lot of people there that had intended to get up to the podium to speak in defense of the building, or in other words, speak out against demolishing the home. And I saw people come in with big packets of information and notes, and there was even one gentleman in his 80s. He was very disappointed that he was not allowed to speak. The reason why was that right when the meeting started, and I'm going to paraphrase as best I can what was said, but apparently the commissioners announced 3 years ago there was a change in the ordinance for the historic district where this home is located. It's right on the edge of the district, and the new ordinance states that before you get a demolition permit to demolish a historic home, if that's what you want to do, demolish it, the owner first has to put the home up for sale on the market and offer it for sale in hopes that somebody else will purchase it and is willing to preserve it. That's new as of, I guess, 2014. So the choice is to the builder who purchased the home last year for $460,000. His choices, according to the commission, are you can either resubmit your application that includes, instead of demolishing the home, to fix the home up, restore it, or put an enlargement on it, or modify it for commercial use. Either that, or put it up for sale on the market. And it is a commercial property, zoned commercial, and put it up for sale. And the way that the new ordinance is worded is that he can then come back to the commission and say, well, I put it up for sale and I couldn't sell it. But it's the ordinance is very vague. It could mean, the way it's worded from what I heard last night is that it needs to be on the market for a reasonable amount of time. And there was a lot of discussion about that. So basically the way the discussion went, one of the commissioners said, well, sometimes the debate was, well, what's a reasonable amount of time? Is it 1 month? Is it 3 months? Is it a half year? 2 years? It could mean anything. And that's pretty much up to the Historic District Commission what a reasonable amount of time is. So, one of the commissioners said, well, there was one piece of historic property that was on the market, and it sat there for almost 2 years before it sold. So the implication was a reasonable amount of time is 2 years. The builder didn't like that, and he was allowed to speak, by the way. He was the only one in the audience. And another commissioner who seemed to be siding with the builder said, well, he wasn't, that commissioner was earlier involved in some kind of a real estate transaction in Northville for a commercial property, and his property that he was involved in sold in 1 month. So there's a wide discrepancy as to what's a reasonable amount of time. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So that was one issue, and so basically what happened is that they told the builder, you can either resubmit your application for rehabbing the home, or you can withdraw it and put it up for sale and come back after you've had your home up for sale for a reasonable amount of time. And so the builder asked if he could speak, and he did get up there, and he was pretty upset, and understandably. Now, I have to say, now I have not been to any of the Historic District Commission meetings on this issue. This was my first one in Northville. Actually, this is my first meeting ever at Northville City Hall, so I can only go by what was said last night. But if we're to take the builder's word for it, he had been in and out of that commission for 6 months. And what he said, he was doing everything that the commission asked him to do, get an engineering survey and study the site and prove to us that your only choice is to demolish the home. The city did the same, and they inspected it, and they disagreed with apparently his inspector. I don't know the whole story there. And the long story short is that the commission really dragged him along for 6 months. And if I'm to understand last night's meeting correctly, the first that anybody heard about this new ordinance where you are required to put the home up for sale, quite frankly, both the Historic District Commission and the builder screwed up, in my opinion. And the Historic District Commission was wrong for dragging him along for 6 months and then just telling him this all of a sudden now. But the builder is at fault too, because if you can afford to spend $460,000 for a home, and if you can afford to hire an attorney and afford to do all of these engineering surveys, why didn't the builder also do his due diligence and study what the ordinance was? So he didn't do that either. And the trouble is now is that he's got a house that's gutted, completely gutted on the inside, and he stripped it down on the inside, and then he decided he did not want to rehab it, but he wanted to demolish it. He should not have done that until he had all of his T's crossed and I's dotted. So there was this back and forth thing for about 15 or 20 minutes between the builder and the commission. But in the end, what they did was, because the application is incomplete, because the rules under the new ordinance, the 3-year-old ordinance, were not adhered to, that the application had to be withdrawn, and because it was withdrawn, the entire public hearing was shut down, and nobody, all of the people that showed up last night who were itching to speak with their documents and their there were probably a lot of folks from possibly the museum or maybe history buffs that had something to say. They couldn't speak, so they were kind of disappointed. And there was even this one elderly gentleman in the audience who's, "Can I speak?" And everybody laughed, and he wouldn't let the gentleman speak because there was no hearing, because it's null and void now. So the home is saved for now, but that doesn't mean it couldn't come back on the chopping block in a few months. So people really need to pay attention to what's going on. He could put it up for sale and in 2 months be back there in January or February and say, okay, I put it up for sale, I listed it for $800,000, nobody would buy it. So, but that the commission, the Historic District Commission, does have free reign to judge what is reasonable, and I guess part of that, if I understand correctly, part of that reasonableness is how you put the selling price. So he was pretty much hopping mad, the builder, and so his main argument after that was, after the fact that he'd been jumping through hoops, is that the builder did a research, and he went back and found that over the past several years, the Historic District Commission allowed, I guess, around a dozen historic homes and structures to be demolished in the historic district. And his argument was that, well, none of these people ever had to put their property up for sale before they demolished it. So he was saying that because you let those people demolish those homes, and you should let me do it, or the builder do it also. And he said that's what his attorney says. You know, my attorney says that I have every right to demolish this home because you let other people do it. And the commission, I have to hand it to the Historic District Commission. They did good last night, because they stood by their guns and said, well, yes, but that was under the old ordinance. You know, the laws were changed 3 years ago. They were changed 2 years before he purchased the home. So the builder's argument was that it doesn't matter. He should be considered under the old laws to suit his own personal needs. And I thought that was borderline arrogant right there. And I thought that was wrong of him to say that. And the thing that really kind of upset more than a few people there was that when he realized that he was not going to be allowed to demolish his home right away, is that, well, there are 6,700 residents in the city of Northville, and only 20 of them are here tonight. As if, well, that because there was a big crowd there, that doesn't mean everybody in Northville is against the demolition. I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? But there's 20 or 30 more there tonight than him, so that's the other side of the coin too. So I thought that was kind of rude, actually, for him to say that, because people have a concern about these homes. So basically, it's put off, and nobody knows what's going to happen next. People are going to have to pay attention to this. I was going to say a few things too. I had a list of points I was going to bring up, and I may as well just say them for the record, because I think these are some of the similar concerns that other folks have, and I was going to tell folks that I didn't live in Northville, but I was very connected to the area, and I grew up in an old village in Plymouth in a very old home. My family's been there since 1825, and my mom lived in Northville Township before she passed away. And what I did, I brought with me an antique glass negative that we had several crates of large glass plate negatives in our barn in Old Village, and we had some relatives over one summer when I was 13, and one of the relatives grabbed the crates and put them on the curb for trash pickup, and I threw a fit. So they were rescued at the last minute, saved from the garbage truck, and one of the negatives, and I knew what they were since I was like 7, 8 years old. One of the negatives was, most of them were for people from Plymouth, and a few dozen downtown Plymouth in the area around. There was one or two of Northville, and one of them was actually a glass plate negative of downtown Northville, and it was a photograph looking south at the main intersection, right where the Masonic Temple was, and that photo is actually in a book titled Northville, and I hope I don't butcher his name up too badly. The author was Michael Fecht, F-E-C-H-T, and on page 53, I'll just show you the picture here briefly. I brought a couple. This is a really bad photo. It's laser print, kind of grainy, but I actually found the glass negative to this when I was 13, and my uncle Davis B. Hilmer taught me how to do contact printing, so I made dozens of prints off of all these plates when I was 13, 14-year-old kid, and I distributed them all over town in Plymouth in the mid-'70s, and I'm assuming that's how Mr. Fecht got a hold of that photo, because I can still see, if you look closely, there's a crack or a line across here, and that line is actually a crack. This is the only plate that I found in that crate that was actually cracked right in two. It's in two pieces, and when I was a kid, I put the two pieces together on photo paper, and I made the print, and it came out really good. But the negatives are in great shape. You can see, if you do a high resolution scan, you can see the expressions on all people's faces. And the negative is actually this big. So anyway, the reason why I brought that, I was going to use that as an example to prove a point, and I was going to hold that up to the Historic District Commission and say, wouldn't it be better to have nothing left than, instead of having nothing left to remind us of what Northville looked like, would it be better than having nothing but photographs and negatives left over? Would it be better to save the actual structures too? And I thought that was going to be a good point to bring up. And then I was going to go on to say the most important thing I think I was going to say last night, and probably other people were going to say too, is that what is the purpose of a historic district commission if it's not to preserve these homes and save them from demolition? And if this has implications not just for Northville but all over the state, because these historic districting laws were created by the state legislature, and if historic towns continue to allow these historic homes and sites to become demolished, then what good are the commissions anyway? They may as well be disbanded. You know, that's what they're there for. They're to protect these historic homes and sites. And once you let one home torn down, then another builder is going to come along months or years later and say, well, you let that developer tear down that house, so why can't I tear down this house? It starts a dominoes effect. And so I was going to bring that up too. It sets a bad precedent. And then I was going to say that Northville is a unique town. It's a very special town because it's done a pretty good job preserving historic homes and sites, and I think better than Plymouth. And I got a hand to the Historic District Commission last night. They did a good job, and I wish the folks in Plymouth City Hall would do the same thing. Recently we lost the Kellogg home to a builder who tore it down to build two brand new units, and a lot of people were upset about that. So these historic communities, there aren't many left. There's not much left to protect, and that makes all the more reason why we should protect what remains. So I was going to say that last night. And people from all over the county and the state visit towns like Northville and Plymouth for that reason. And if these towns continue to squander their historic treasures, they just become like any other town in urban sprawl. So, and the other point I was going to bring up was that these builders have to start understanding something. When you buy a historic home in a historic town, a home which lies within a historic district, there are expectations of the communities. These districts were created because the residents move there and live there and care about their towns, and they want those structures protected. And it is really and I don't mean to be rude to builders, but to be honest, it's really kind of arrogant to come into a city hall and expect to get your way every time with these historic homes, because it's being disrespectful to the residents is what it is. And really, I truly think that builder disrespected every Northville resident that was in that room by suggesting that these 20 people don't matter because there are other people in Northville that didn't show up. Well, what about the people that did take time out of their day to show up, to come to City Hall at 7 o'clock at night on a weeknight? They took time out of their busy schedule too, and they were there to talk, and they weren't allowed to. But the builder is allowed to talk for 20 or 30 minutes. So there's an expectation. And one of the last things I was going to mention last night, the builder was saying, well, it might take him a year to sell the house. Well, I hate to say it, but that's his problem. He has the means and the resources to do his due diligence on his investments. And he probably shouldn't have stripped down the inside of the house, as I said earlier, unless this was a done deal. Now, and you can't make backroom deals with commissioners. It's illegal. It's against the Michigan Open Meetings Act. So if he had any understandings or promises on the side, that's wrong. You can't do that. In Michigan, there's what's called the Michigan Open Meetings Act, and all of these decisions need to be made in public. So the other thing I was going to mention is that if he thinks it's going to cost him that much, oh, there goes my fan, so it's going to make some noise probably on the video. I was going to offer to him a name of a gentleman. There's a really nice guy in Ypsilanti. His name is Michael Furbacher, and he is restoring by himself a beautiful 1880s built home on 218 North River in Ypsilanti in the historic district. He gave me permission months ago to use his name. He's doing a wonderful job. He's doing it by himself. On the weekend he has a little help from his friends, but his home had foundation trouble too. It was beefed up. It's just fine now, and now he's stripping the inside, and he's doing it right and doing it in accordance to the historic district rules. And I'm sure you could give him some advice. And I seriously doubt it's costing that gentleman $750,000 to bring that house up to where he wants it to be. Now I realize this is a commercial property that the builder wants to put in that spot. But okay, you know, if it's a commercial property, it's going to make money, and so there's going to be more money outflow once it's done. So if I were him, I would, if he really doesn't want to fix it up, he should sell it and sell it for maybe what he paid for it for, try to get a little profit and get out of the investment, because people are starting to push back in these historic communities. They're tired of seeing these historic homes demolished, and all over the southeast Michigan area, and residents are applying pressure on these commissions. And the thing is, these commissioners, they live in the town too. They're next door neighbors to the people who are getting upset about these homes being demolished, and residents are taking names and paying attention to what these people are doing as far as allowing these homes to become demolished. But you know, mistakes of the past. Okay, the commission allowed these homes to be demolished in the past. They changed the ordinance to help to prevent that, and I think it's wrong for builders to expect and to feel entitled that the laws don't apply to them, the new ordinances. And again, it comes down to due diligence. And so anyway, that's what I wanted to say tonight, or this afternoon. And the only other thing was, yeah, that photo, by the way, that I just showed you, that was 102 East Main Street, the cobbler shop, and the Lucy's, I think it's called. And it's at East Main and South Center, southeast corner. So I hope you have a happy holiday and keep track of what's going on, because it's not saved forever. Historic preservation is an ongoing fight, and people need to pay attention to what's going on in their city hall. So thanks very much, and Merry Christmas.